Right, let us move on to the next part. Question to the Secretary of State for Works and Pensions, Ben Obese-Jecty.
Question number 1, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you. If I may say briefly, Mr Speaker, as my right honourable friend the Prime Minister has said, the 7th of October last year was the deadliest day in Jewish history since the Holocaust, and we stand firm in our commitment to bring the remaining hostages home and to secure the immediate ceasefire and aid that civilians in Gaza and Lebanon desperately need. Permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to answer questions 1, 18 and 24 together. An estimated 880,000 of the poorest pensioners aren't claiming the pension credit they're entitled to, so they don't get the winter fuel payment and up to £3,900 a year pension credit. That's why we've launched the biggest ever drive to increase pension credit uptake and ensure the poorest pensioners get the support they deserve.
Ben Obese-Jecty.
I thank the Secretary of State for her response. Having spent the run-up to the election scaring pensioners into voting for them by claiming it was the Conservative government that was a threat to their well-being, some of our poorest pensioners will now be forced to find out how difficult it is to keep warm, huddled around Labour's gaslight. Given the government's own equality analysis states that only 100,000 pensioners of the 880,000 who are eligible are expected to apply for pension credit, if all those who are eligible do apply, how much more will it cost compared to the initial saving from removing the winter fuel payment?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I would say gently to him that coming in and discovering 880,000 pensioners aren't claiming the pension credit they're entitled to, and that his former government failed to take action to deal with this issue, I would suggest that instead of that point, that he works with his council to increase pension credit uptake and to look at the £1.8 million that we have given to Peterborough Council to make sure all the help to pensioners, including on winter fuel, is made available.
Bordon.
Mr Speaker, I remain deeply concerned about the pensioners in my constituency who will not be entitled to the winter fuel payment this winter. We're now into October. Given we now know that just 14% of pensioners in absolute poverty receive pension credit, I'd like to ask the Minister, how can she justify the claim made by her government that they're focusing support on those in the greatest need?
Again, I would say to the honourable lady, the reason that so many of the poorest pensioners are missing out is because her government failed to increase pension credit uptake. And I would suggest we have launched the biggest ever programme to increase uptake of pension credit. We will be writing to all pensioners on housing benefit for the first time. I would urge her to work with her local council and others to make sure the poorest in her constituency get the money they're entitled to.
Gregory Stafford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Over 18,000 people in my constituency will lose the winter fuel payment, but this isn't about figures, it's about individuals, which is why I'm running a pensioners' advice service on Friday to help them with this. This is about people. So what does the Secretary of State say to people like Rita in my constituency, who is looking after her husband who has multiple sclerosis and who will not be eligible for pension credit and therefore for the winter fuel payments?
I know that the honourable gentleman has focused over many years on the health and healthcare issues, and I would say to him the reason we are in this situation is because his government left a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. And unlike members opposite, we take our responsibility seriously, and I would urge him to work with his councils who have received £7.1 million in Hampshire, £5.3 million in Surrey on the Household Support Fund to make sure all pensioners get the money they're entitled to.
Debbie Abrahams, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I welcome the work that my right honourable friend is doing in terms of ensuring that the uptake of pension credit is increased. But I do think that there are genuine concerns about those people who are just above that threshold but still remain in poverty, just under 250,000 in the northwest alone. In addition to the fantastic commitment there has been around the Household Support Fund, are there any other mitigations that my right honourable friend will be undertaking to ensure those people, pensioners living in poverty, and particularly disabled pensioners, aren't going to fall foul of this?
I thank my honourable friend for her question and welcome her to her position as chair of the Select Committee. Alongside our work to increase pension credit uptake, I would also say that the Household Support Fund is available for those just above the pension credit level. In my own council has done a lot of work to make sure those pensioners just above can get extra help with the cost of heating or energy debt. And there's the Warm Homes discount, which is available not just to those on pension credit, but again, those just above if they're on low incomes and have high housing costs.
Rachael Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate the Secretary of State's ambition to sign people up to pension credit, but we know around 780,000 people won't sign up in time, but also with 1 million people in fuel poverty above that mark. In the light that we are really, really worried now, as winter is approaching, about the impact this is going to have, particularly on the health of older people, will she look at the work that has been done by Energy Systems Catapult and NHS Gloucestershire in social prescribing to ensure that people can receive energy payments that way?
My honourable friend raises a very important point. I would say it's not just about urging people to increase, to come forward and claim. We're writing to pensioners on housing benefit for the first time ever, and I am determined to bring forward the merger of housing benefit and pension credit, which the former government delayed for years. And I very much agree at the need to bring together social prescribing, help from the Household Support Fund and other areas to make sure pensioners get all the help they need, and to work with frontline NHS staff, as we are also doing, to make sure that the poorest who may be stuck at home with chronic conditions also know what they're entitled to.
Alistair, Strathern.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that one of the drivers of pension poverty is the sheer number of pensioners eligible for pension credit left not claiming it for successive years by the previous government. I welcome Secretary of State's zeal for making sure we put this right, but how can we as members from across the House work with her department to make sure there are no unnecessary barriers for those who are eligible and in need of pension credit to claim it this winter?
I would urge all honourable members in this House to work with their local councils, as I am doing, to make sure those on housing benefit and other pensioners know what they're entitled to, and to make sure that the Household Support Fund, £421 million that we've set aside this year, despite all the problems we face, that his council knows that that is also available to those pensioners just above the pension credit level.
So the Secretary of State, Mel Stride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the general election, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite promised that it had no plans to means test the winter fuel allowance, and yet we learned that millions of pensioners to be affected. Indeed, in 2017, her own party produced an analysis suggesting that around 4,000 pensioners would die prematurely were this policy to be brought into effect. Does the Right Honourable Lady stand by that figure of around 4,000? If not, how many premature deaths does she believe will occur as a result of this policy?
In 2017, his party's manifesto promised to means test winter fuel payments. So, and I would just say to the honourable gentleman, until party members opposite know that they have to apologise to the British people for the 200,000 extra pensioners in poverty over the last 14 years, and for a £22 billion black hole in the public finances, which we are now putting right, which has put the public finances at risk, they will remain on those seats and we will remain on these.
Mel Stride.
I think, Mr. Speaker, I need to correct the Right Honourable Lady. There are actually 200,000 fewer pensioners and absolute poverty under the last Conservative government. But could I ask her, she quite rightly is pressing on the uptake of pensioner credit. But if all of those that are eligible for it take it up, that will be at a cost of £3.8 billion, substantially more than the saving that is scored of £1.4 billion. So if the Right Honourable Lady is successful in her aspiration, the costs will substantially outweigh the savings. If she is not successful, then potentially millions of pensioners will be plunged further into poverty. Can I ask her which it is?
There are 200,000 more pensioners in poverty, and I'm happy to put those figures in the public debate to set the record straight in that. And the savings that we have put forward take into account the increase in uptake that we foresee. But unlike members opposite, we will do everything possible, and they should perhaps ask themselves, why did they first announced the merger of pension credit and housing benefit in 2012 and then put it off till 2018? Because we are determined to change things, get people the money they're entitled to. We will bring that forward to make sure all the poorest pensioners get what they're entitled to.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Steve Darling.
Mr. Speaker, there are 2.7 million pensioners who are over the age of 80 and would be benefiting from the £300 winter fuel allowance. These are amongst the most vulnerable in our society, and you're quite right how the previous government let them down. But let us not add insult to injury, and the new government let them down. Can you reassure us that you will reverse from this regressive approach that you've taken with the winter fuel allowance and not hit the most vulnerable who are over 80?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. He will know that this was not a decision that we wanted or expected to make. The reason we have done it is that we have to deal with the £22 billion black hole in the public finances left by members opposite. But in doing so, we will, as a progressive party, always prioritise the very poorest pensioners. And that is why we are so determined to end a situation where up to 880,000 miss out on winter fuel because they're not getting pension credit, and we're determined to put that right.
Joanna Baxter.
Question number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me thank the Honourable Lady for her question. Labour's manifesto said that we will tackle the backlog of access to work claims, and we will. We have improved the process and have increased the number of staff processing claims, but there is more to do, and this work is ongoing.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that delays to the processing of access to work claims impact not only the individual in terms of their health, particularly their mental health, but their ability to fulfil their potential and contribute to our economy? What further steps will she take to ensure that the process for helping disabled people back into work is reformed to ensure that it is genuinely one of support that allows people to fulfil their potential and enables businesses to thrive?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would agree wholeheartedly with the Honourable Lady. Disabled people have the right to work like everybody else, and we have an ambition to see 80% employment rate in this country, and we cannot do that without the contribution of people with disabilities. So as we work on our employment white paper and develop our policies, we want to see everybody in this country making their full contribution, and most especially disabled people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Will Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The consultation... Number 3, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Child Maintenance Service is committed to ensuring that separated parents support their children financially, taking robust enforcement action against those who do not. Between March 2023 and March of this year, the percentage of parents paying something towards their maintenance through collect and pay increased from 65% to 69%. This government recognises that child maintenance payments play a crucial role in keeping hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty each year, and we are determined to do all we can to increase those collection levels further.
Alster.
With around half of children in separate families, that's 1.8 million children, receiving no support from their non-residential parent, does the Minister know when this figure might change?
The honourable gentleman raises an important point around those families who receive no support. I'm told the figure is actually around 40%, but nonetheless it is not high enough, although there are varied reasons for that. Indeed, there are some parents who do not want an arrangement, but we are currently, as the honourable gentleman may be aware, looking at a recently concluded consultation on the future of the child maintenance service, and we will consider our next steps with a view to looking to increase collection levels wherever we can.
Well, you've got to stand. I don't know, I'm pretty good, but I can't win the lottery either. Andrew Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 constituents have contacted me with separate but similar cases relating to obtaining child maintenance payments from abusive ex-partners. In both cases, their abusers have been able to use features of the system to avoid paying their fair share to their victims and their children, leaving my constituents with a shortfall of thousands of pounds. Can my honourable friends tell me what steps are being taken to reform the child maintenance system to protect victims of abuse like my constituents?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Department takes the issue of domestic abuse extremely seriously, and as I referenced in my previous answer, the honourable gentleman will be keen to hear that the recently concluded consultation looked to address some of the issues with the direct pay service. Indeed, it consulted on the potential removal of that service moving forward. That is something that has been open to abuse and has led to victims of domestic abuse continuing to be terrorised. That is unacceptable, and it is something that we will look to address moving forward.
Thomas.
Number 4, Mr. Speaker.
I welcome the honourable gentleman to his place. Pensioners with a long-term health condition or disability may be eligible for disability-related benefits such as disability living allowance or attendance allowance, and these benefits also provide for an additional amount in pension credit for those on low incomes.
Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the government's impersonal approach is cold comfort to thousands of disabled pensioners, including Anne in my constituency, who has to boil water to prevent infection. She uses an electric nebulizer, and as a result of her high energy usage to protect her health, can the Minister tell Anne what sacrifices she should make to protect her health this winter?
Thank the honourable gentleman for his question. This is a decision that we neither wanted or expected to make. But when we came into office, there was a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. There are mitigations in place. We've extended the Household Support Fund, and his own council will receive an extra £3.9 million. We are increasing the state pension by the triple lock. We'll see the state pension increase by £1,700 in this Parliament. And we will also deliver the Warm Homes discount scheme, and I hope he will join with me in making sure that every pensioner who is eligible for pension credit certainly receives it, so that that will passport them to the winter fuel payment.
Neil Duncan-Jordan.
Mr. Speaker, we know that there are over 2 million older people currently living in poverty in this country, with millions more with incomes just above the poverty level. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the government should set up a pensioner task force to look at ways in which pensioner poverty can be tackled once and for all?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. I will indeed meet with him and any other members of this House who have concerns on this matter.
Blake Stevenson.
Number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and with permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to answer questions 6 and 8 together. We have been running a national campaign since September on a range of channels, including print and broadcast media, to encourage pensioners to check their eligibility and make a claim, and we will continue to work with external partners, local authorities and devolved governments to boost the take-up of pension credit.
Blake Stevenson.
Around 93% of pensioners in mid-Bedfordshire face losing the winter fuel payment this year, some earning less than £1,000 per month. What further support is the Minister going to give them to fill Labour's black hole in their household finances so they can keep warm this winter?
Yeah, very good. Very good question.
The winter fuel payment, Mr. Speaker, was once described as the largest benefit paid to pensioners, regardless of need, giving money to the wealthiest pensioners when working people on low incomes do not get similar support. Not my words, but the words of the Tory 2017 manifesto.
Paul Davies.
Mr. Speaker, claiming pension credit can provide pensioners with additional help for housing costs, council tax and heating bills. We all have a duty to boost pension credit uptake to ensure that low-income pensioners in all of our constituencies receive the necessary support. I welcomed the Deputy Prime Minister and Work and Pension Secretary collaborating with local authorities and charities for the annual Pension Credit Week of Action that took place during recess. Can I ask the Minister what more can be done to ensure low-income pensioners are receiving pension credit?
Thank my honourable friend. We were very pleased to see that 160 local authorities have responded positively to our call for action and are working with us to drive the boost uptake of pension credit. Apart from the national campaign that we've been running, we will also bring together the administration of housing benefit and pension credit in a way that the former government failed to do.
Ahmed Yassin.
7, please, Mr. Speaker.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and with permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to answer questions 7 and 23 together. I was the first minister to meet with WASPI campaigners for 8 long years to hear their experiences directly. However, we do need time to carefully consider the Ombudsman report and evidence before we can outline our approach.
Mr. Speaker, I have long supported the women in Bedford, born in the 1950s, who were failed by the DWP. We must do right by the WASPI women, some of whom are struggling to make ends meet. So can the Minister tell them today when the government will respond to the report by the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman, which recommended a compensation scheme?
Thank you. Thank my honourable friend. The Ombudsman's report is a serious report which took 6 years to complete, and it deserves serious consideration. And we are carefully reviewing the details of this very complex report, and we will come to a conclusion in the round. Thank you.
Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I echo the sentiments of the honourable member for Bedford, because this is a very serious injustice and one that's being compounded by the lack of swift action for redress. It's a matter that really matters to all our constituents, including mine in Norfolk and Suffolk, where I've spoken to the local WASPI women group, who highlight just how big an impact this is having, including on women born in the 1950s who are struggling to make ends meet. So could I ask the Minister to please set out the timescale with which she will take forward responding to this report and setting out the action that will be taken?
I thank him for his question. The Ombudsman took 6 years to look into what is a very serious, significant and complex set of cases, and we need time to look at this case very, very seriously, and we're doing precisely that.
Dame McGilliard.
Number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, we are committed to supporting vulnerable customers into work. At job centres, for example, we can identify the support that's needed and signpost people to courses or organisations to help overcome the barriers, and we'll be saying more about our proposals in the forthcoming employment white paper.
Dame McGilliard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my constituency, in my local job centre on Mare Street, there is an extremely good team of DWP staff that work very closely with vulnerable constituents to help them overcome the hurdles of getting benefits and getting into work. However, for people with fluctuating conditions, particularly with mental health conditions, there are many barriers, both for them and for prospective employers. I wonder if the Minister could give a taster of what might be in the white paper in terms of support, particularly for employers, to be encouraged to take on people with such challenges.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I very much welcome her positive report of work in her local job centre. She highlights a major challenge behind a significant proportion of increased inactivity over the last few years. We will be setting out our response in the Get Britain Working White Paper, but we are already providing tailored support in partnership with NHS talking therapies and individual placement and support in primary care. But my honourable friend is absolutely right. There's a good deal more to be done.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Conservative-run East Sussex County Council is threatening to close the Steps to Work programme, as well as Linden Court in Eastbourne, that support people with learning disabilities towards employment. Will the Minister urge the County Council to halt their plans and to consider other alternatives like selling off their council building to raise the funds needed to provide these essential services for people with learning disabilities?
Well, the honourable gentleman draws my attention to a concerning development. My view is we need more support for people with learning disabilities getting to work, not less. But if he'd like to send me details of the concerns that he's raised, I'll be very happy to look into them further.
Shadow Minister Mims-Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The well-received and groundbreaking Buckland Review of Autism Employment focused on the action needed to help tackle the lack of opportunities and outdated recruitment practices that do not meet autistic people's employment needs. How is the Minister, and I welcome him to his place, going to use this review, and I seem to remember him welcoming this review, to tackle the lack of understanding and ongoing stereotypes to help make real change via access to work and other DWP interventions?
The honourable lady for her welcome. I'm looking forward to a meeting with Sir Robert later on this month, and we'll be talking exactly about that matter.
Mims-Davies.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman, Right Honourable Gentleman, for that answer. The Disability Action Plan mid-year update is now somewhat overdue. Can the Minister confirm when there will be a much-needed update to the House? And if, Mr. Speaker, in the focus of helping vulnerable people to thrive in all walks of life, whether in employment or for equality of opportunity, will his government commit, like the previous Conservative government, to working towards hosting the 2031 Special Olympics?
Well, I'm grateful to her. We will be saying, or we will be providing an update in the forthcoming Get Britain Working white paper. And if she'd like to drop me a line about the Special Olympics, I'll be happy to look into that one as well.
Right. We now come to Stuart Anderson.
Question number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We need job centres to be better everywhere, including those in rural areas, which have unique challenges. So we will publish our plans to transform the employment support system in a white paper in the autumn, which will change job centres. And I would welcome input from members from all sides of this House on that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In South Shropshire, youth unemployment has risen over the last month, and I'd be keen to know what the Minister is going to do to stop this worrying trend in rural communities like mine.
Mr. Speaker, can I just thank the member for bringing that point to the House? That is a major focus of the work that's going into the white paper at the moment. We've had very worrying developments since the pandemic for young people, and we need to do much better to give them the best possible start in life. And Mr. Speaker, I say again, on this issue, we welcome input from members on all sides of the House.
Jenny Riddle-Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Housing associations are the second largest investor into employment support in the UK, second only to the Department for Work and Pensions. Their work invests in employment support for some of the hardest to reach communities, including rural communities such as mine of Suffolk Coastal. Will the Minister commit to working with housing associations to co-design and co-invest employment support over this Parliament?
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And can I just thank the member again for that very welcome point that she makes. Housing associations are extremely important in connecting up with their residents who often have multiple kinds of vulnerabilities. And when we're thinking about the journey into work, we need to make sure we've got joined up services between the NHS, the local authority and our housing associations. So they will be a part of the partnership in the future, and I look forward to working with her for her constituency.
Patrick Hurley.
11, Mr. Speaker.
To be frank, Mr. Speaker, the current system is focused on the problems of yesterday. In the last Parliament, economic inactivity increased and the employment rate fell. We are planning fundamental reforms to the system that will focus on the problems of today and get more people into work, details of which will be set out in our forthcoming white paper, Get Britain Working.
Patrick Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for his response. I'd like to ask about the proposed merger between Job Centre Plus and the National Careers Service. Specifically, could the Minister set out how that proposed merger will help to tackle economic inactivity and to change the way that we see job centres work with their customers?
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? I was pleased to hear that one of his earliest visits as the first ever Labour member for Southport was to his local job centre with the Minister for Employment, who I know would want me to take the opportunity to commend all of the staff at the Southport Job Centre. The truth is that at present, job centres can seem to function more as places from which benefits are administered than as centres supporting people into work. The merger of Job Centre Plus and the National Careers Service will address this, enabling us to get more people into employment and helping those on low pay increase their earnings through more personalised and localised support, ensuring nobody is left behind.
Tim Farrell.
The challenge that the job centres in Kendall and the rest of Cumbria face, as well as getting people back into work, is simply the fact that our workforce in Westland is simply far too small. We have an average house price in our constituency of 12 times average earnings and waiting lists for social housing, which is through the roof. If we want to tackle the problem in our economy, and 66% of all employers surveyed in our community recently said they were working below capacity because they couldn't find enough staff, what we really need to do is two things. One is to increase the amount of social housing they've got, and secondly is to allow more flexible visa arrangements. So would his department work with colleagues in housing to provide more housing grant for our communities and sign up to youth mobility visa arrangements?
I think the honourable member should know better. He does get in a lot, so don't take advantage of other members. Come on.
The honourable gentleman will be pleased to know that we do intend to work considerably more flexibly to support the needs of communities in a varied and, particularly bespoke way. He does have particular challenges because of the rural nature of his constituency and various other factors. But what he will appreciate is that I am not going to make housing or Home Office policy on the hoof from the dispatch box today.
Shadow Minister Mims Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Job centres are extremely good. We just heard from the Honourable Lady from Hackney South in Shoreditch as she leaves the chamber. Yet, Mr. Speaker, the new Minister for Employment previously described job centres as places nobody wants to go and claimed they don't offer real help. Our job centres helped ensure almost 4 million more people have work compared to when her party left office in 2010. Over 2 million of those employed are women. Will the Minister and the team of DWP ministers who've made disparaging remarks apologise to work coaches and DWP staff who she and they have rubbished, who will now have to look up to her and them as the new ministerial team?
They want change.
I fear, Mr. Speaker, that the Honourable Lady has misunderstood the criticism which is levied not at our outstanding work coaches, but at the policies of the party opposite, who have left us in a position where economic inactivity is at the highest rate in years, and we are the only G7 economy with a lower employment rate than since before the pandemic. These are the challenges that we have been left with. These are the problems that we will solve.
Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, provider guidance published on gov.uk makes clear that contractors on all of our employment programmes must reimburse customers reasonable travel costs.
Josh Dewberry.
I thank the Minister for that response, because my constituent Connor is in this predicament where he's out of pocket for taxi fares to weekly or even twice weekly sessions with a job centre private contractor. Connor told me that these sessions barely last 15 minutes and they aren't helping him reach his goal of becoming a mechanical engineering apprentice. So can I ask the Minister if he will review the value of job centre plus private contracts to both job seekers and taxpayers?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Of course, performance is reviewed regularly. There are customer satisfaction surveys to check on satisfaction. But I would say that unlike the last government, this one wants to publish performance data so that everybody can see what's going on.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his response to that answer? I think, Minister, everyone wishes to see those claimants being able to get job opportunities, number one, and then to not find themselves in a financial mucks, which they do because of having to pay out for travel costs whenever they should be reimbursed. In Northern Ireland and my constituency, it's a big issue. Can the Minister help directly for those constituents who have been disadvantaged accordingly? Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. I'm not familiar with the arrangements in Northern Ireland, but certainly in the UK, it is very clear that contractors need to reimburse those costs, ideally pay up front, buy the tickets and give them to the job seeker before they embark on their journey, or if not, reimburse them very quickly on production of a receipt.
Torsten Bell.
13, Mr. Speaker.
Tackling child poverty is a top priority of the new government and a personal priority for me, because you can't fulfil your potential without food in your belly or a decent roof over your head, and we can't fill our potential as a country when the talents of so many are being left behind. That's why our new Child Poverty Task Force will drive action across every area of government to drive up family income, drive down family costs, and give every child the best start in life.
Torsten Bell.
Mr. Speaker, and can I welcome the establishment of the Child Poverty Task Force? Can I ask the Secretary of State how we'll ensure that the task force will ensure that lessons, including the role of housing costs in driving up relative poverty and the necessity of growth to drive down absolute poverty, will be learned from previous attempts to drive down child poverty in Wales and across the UK?
My honourable friend makes a very important point about learning the lessons from the last time where we were in government and lifted more than 600,000 children out of poverty, to look at the similarities and differences, not least that there are more children growing up in poverty in households where there's in the private rented sector, in social housing, and that there are more children growing up poor in a household where somebody works. So creating more good quality jobs and helping families into those jobs is absolutely a crucial part of our child poverty plan.
Black.
Yet we have a situation where families with more children are impacted by the two-child cap and by the benefit cap, and the government is refusing to get rid of these things. At a stroke, they could lift thousands of children out of poverty and improve overnight their life chances. Now, I appreciate the fact that they've got the Child Poverty Task Force, but that's not making a difference to these children today, is it?
I'm under no illusion about the impact 14 years of the Conservatives and the social security system has had on child poverty. And that is why we are determined to take action across government to increase family incomes, to drive down costs, and to crucially put in place the long-term support, particularly in the early years. We'll be producing that strategy by the spring, and I am absolutely sure that every part of that plan will lift more children out of poverty.
Luke Akerst.
Question number 14, Mr. Speaker.
The last Labour government lifted 600,000 children out of poverty. Under the Conservatives, the number went up by 700,000. There are now more than 4 million children living in poverty in the UK. In the 21st century, in one of the richest countries in the world, I think that is a complete disgrace. And that is why the work of the Child Poverty Task Force that I co-chair with the Education Secretary is so urgent and so important.
Okay, Kurs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Almost a third of children in the North East live in poverty, and it's a particularly acute problem in the region. Will the Secretary of State work with our North East Mayor, Kim McGuinness, on her excellent regional plans to reduce child poverty?
Yes, we have already met with Kim McGuinness on the 17th of September, where she set out the action she is already taking, and I would say to honourable members on all sides of the House, our strategy will be out in the spring, but we are not waiting to act. Nationally, we've put £421 million into the Household Support Fund to help the poorest families, and mayors like Kim McGuinness are doing amazing work to make sure, working with schools to make sure people claim the benefits they're entitled to, and crucially working with businesses to help them do everything they can to tackle in-work poverty and to make sure those working families get the money to those poor children.
Alison, you.
15, Mr Speaker.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to answer questions 15 and 16 together. The work of unpaid carers is absolutely vital and often heroic, and we're determined to give unpaid carers the support they need. We're looking at the moment at options on tackling the problem with overpayments, including the possible introduction of a text alert service.
Alison, you.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Carers make incredible sacrifices to care for loved ones, but they can be left deep in debt repaying carers' allowance after unintentionally breaching the qualifying rules. Does my honourable friend agree that as a society we have a duty of care to carers? And can he say more about the progress the government is making in overhauling the carers' allowance and addressing the earnings cliff edge?
Grateful to my honourable friend, and she's absolutely right in what she says, and I do agree with her that we need to support carers properly. We want to get to the bottom of what's gone wrong with these overpayments, why so many people have been caught out, and we have been piloting the introduction of a text message service. That's involved texting 3,500 claimants to alert them when HMRC informs DWP that the claimant has breached the current earnings limit. We're looking at those results at the moment, and if they're positive, then that would be the first step to address the overpayments problem. I think there's more we're going to need to do, but that will be a good first step.
Dixon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There are nearly 1,200 recipients of carers allowance in my constituency of Shipley. The current earning limit leaves people vulnerable to accidentally accruing overpayments if they become ineligible for carers allowance. It also acts as a disincentive to people working as much as they would like to. Will the government consider raising the earnings limit for carers allowance? Thank you.
Well, my honourable friend has written to me about this matter, and I welcome her commitment to progress in this area. In an excellent piece of work, the former Work and Pensions Select Committee made a number of recommendations on the earnings rules, and once the new committee is in place, we shall be responding to the former committee's proposals.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Minister has indicated the army of carers that we have across the country. We also have an army of unpaid carers who are now being deterred from actually coming forward and applying for carers allowance because of a concern that they will be put into this financial implications. Can the government reassure those people who haven't come forward yet that they will be supported properly?
I very much hope that we can, Mr Speaker, and the honourable member is absolutely right. There is a good deal of anxiety around, I think, about these overpayment problems. We're hoping that this alert service will at least inform people when they run into a problem so that they don't then develop a large overpayment, which has happened far too often in the past. But I think we do need to look as well at the other arrangements around carers allowance to provide the reassurance that he rightly calls for.
Dr Rupert.
Number 17, please, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank the member for her question. In May 2019, the universal credit sanction rate was 3.17%, reducing considerably during the pandemic and gradually returning to 3.51% by November 2021. The rate continued to rise, reaching a peak of 7.29% in October 2023, but is now falling with a rate of 6.17% in May 2024.
Recent research by Gingerbread found a high percentage of sanctions misapplied to single parents, not for not meeting the job search requirements, but because of missed meetings due to childcare, like Max, a bereaved single dad of 2, who actually had his overturned, which is quite a challenging process. So in light of all that, would my honourable friend look into overhauling the mess of a system left behind by that lot over there?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank the Honourable Lady for her question, and through her, if I may, I'd like to thank Gingerbread for their work on this. There have always been and always will be conditions attached to social security. But the past 14 years show what happens when you have a government that is more interested in blaming people and cheap headlines than offering real help. In our manifesto, Labour committed to reviewing universal credit so that it makes work pay and tackles poverty. And the report that Gingerbread have written will also help inform our Child Poverty Task Force.
We come to Topicals. Chris Webb.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'm determined to put transparency at the heart of the DWP. So I have today published 31 reports that were sat on by the previous government, something my right honourable friend, the Minister for Social Security and Disability, has long campaigned for. Under this government's leadership, the DWP will be honest about the problems the country faces, focused on the solutions needed to help people build a better life, and that starts with our forthcoming white paper to get Britain working again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first joined WASPy Women in their local campaign activity back in 2017. 7 years later, they're still fighting for justice. Can the Minister ensure women in my constituency and across the country that she'll act urgently, unlike the previous government, and bring this injustice to an end?
I thank my honourable friend for raising that question. I myself met with the WASPy Women campaign before this government was elected. My honourable friend, the Minister for Pensioners, was the first Minister to meet with them in 8 years. It really is a serious report that requires serious consideration. We will do everything possible to get this issue resolved as soon as possible.
Secretary of State Mel Stride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the 10th of September, 2 days before recess, I led a debate secured by the party that I represent, the Conservative Party, in this chamber on winter fuel allowance. Now, the Right Honourable Lady spoke just now about transparency, but there was no equality impact assessment made available for that debate. Indeed, on the 30th of August, Mr. Speaker, by way of a written question, my honourable friend, the member for Hinckley and Bosworth, established from the government that they had no intention of publishing that particular report. Yet on the 13th of September, 2 days after the debate and the vote, and 1 day after Parliament had risen, the report was made available. It was clearly, in my opinion,
Secretary of State.
Not true. I mean, coming from a party that did not even allow the OBR to do an analysis of Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget, that sat on 31 publications when under its own rules they should have been published, we published an equality analysis. He will know when he was in government this was never done for secondary legislation, but Mr. Speaker, this government will be open and transparent, and that's what we're already doing.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Since the election, numerous constituents have contacted me raising concerns about the Child Maintenance Service's inefficiency in collecting arrears payments. Can the Minister outline the measures being taken to enhance the service's effectiveness in this area?
My honourable friend is entirely right to raise this issue, and he will be pleased to know that this government is looking to utilise new powers to obtain a liability order without recourse to the courts, reducing the time taken to secure such an order from 22 weeks to around 6.
We come to Lib Dem spokesperson Steve Darling.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, may I draw your attention to a report published by the University of Bath very recently, which highlighted how there were a series of cliff edges that benefit claimants faced if they aimed additional funds, and just at £7,399 they would lose the ability for free school meals. What plans do you have to tackle this lack of compassion in the system?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not familiar with the particular report that the honourable member refers to, but we are committed in our manifesto to review universal credit 15 years nearly after it was first launched. And this issue, the cliff edge issue, and others, will be among those that we will want to look at in the course of that review.
Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years of Tory economic chaos and 17 years of SNP public service failure, as many as 1 in 4 children in my constituency of Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy now live in poverty. Last year, the Scottish Children's Commissioner said that former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon had absolutely failed young people in Scotland. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that tackling child poverty will be a crucial part of the work of this Labour government? And as part of the important work she is doing with the task force to develop a new child poverty strategy, will she
Order. Sorry. The topicals, please, if we can keep them short, because I've got to try and get through the list to help others. Who's answering? Secretary of State.
My honourable friend has raised these issues with me before. I will absolutely meet with children, families and child poverty organisations from her constituency. We aim to be visiting every region and every devolved nation as part of that strategy, and I look forward to meeting her and her constituents then.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Data from Marie Curie suggests that 90,000 people die in poverty every year, many of them after a terminal diagnosis. Even with the help of the special rules system, there have been reports of terminally ill people facing mounds of red tape and trying to claim benefits. Is the Minister satisfied the current 12-month limit on special rules is sufficient, and has she assessed how the current administrative burden on terminally ill people claiming benefits can be reduced?
The Honourable Lady raises an extremely important question that I have discussed with a hospice and other organisations like Marie Curie Sue Ryder in my own constituency. I want to look at how the system can be made to work as quickly and swiftly as possible, particularly for people at this very difficult time in life, and I would be happy for the Social Security Minister or my office to contact her directly to get more information.
Marcia de Cordova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Research by Sense has found that none of the computers in job centres across Britain are equipped with specialist assistive technology. They have estimated that it will cost £5 million to make sure every job centre has the specialist assistive technology. So will the Minister commit to introducing a job centre assistive technology fund to aid disabled people in their quest to look for work?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member, who's an absolute expert on this kind of inclusive change that we need to make to our employment support system so that we can help everybody. And I look forward to working with her on ideas just like that when we bring forward our white paper in the autumn.
Ollie Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the AEAT pension scheme have collectively lost millions of pounds from their pensions, despite being told that they would be no less favourable following privatisation of their pension scheme in 1996. The Public Accounts Committee found that they received inadequate information from government and lost money as a result. Will the Minister provide a clear timescale for redress for AEAT pensioners in this unique case, as promised by a previous Pensions Minister?
I thank him for that question. I have looked into this issue. It has got a long and complex history. I'd be very willing to meet with him to discuss it in more detail.
Deirdre Costigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State has today published 31 research papers commissioned but hidden by the previous government, which, amongst other things, provide valuable insight into the experience of disabled people applying for personal independence payments to live and work independently. Why does the Minister think the last government chose not to publish these findings?
My honourable friend asked an extremely good question. The policy of the previous government was to publish all such commissioned research reports within 12 weeks of receiving them. That policy was complied with until 2018, and then ministers stopped complying with it, and we've had to publish all of these reports today. My right honourable friend's announcement is a vital first step in rebuilding trust in the department that was so shattered by the culture of secrecy, obfuscation and cover-up by ministers opposite.
In response to several honourable members, ministers have said how complex the Ombudsman's report into the WASPI women is. Whilst appreciating that, can I ask them for a statement in principle that they will eventually offer significant compensation to the WASPI women?
This is a very complex issue. As I said previously, the Ombudsman took 6 years to consider this complex case. We are looking into this very seriously, but I can't make any announcements today. He will have to wait for our announcement in the round on this issue.
Burrows Curtis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's proposed youth guarantee will help ensure young people are learning or earning. Of course, in Wales, the Welsh Government already has the Young Persons Guarantee, which is a key commitment of the Labour-run Welsh Government. Can the Minister assure me and my constituents in Cardiff West that this Government will learn from the work that Wales is doing in this area?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, I'd like to assure the member that we will be working with Welsh Government and Welsh local authorities and all of our colleagues right across the United Kingdom to get the policy right for young people. I think they've been failed over recent years, and it's about time they got the future they deserve.
Priti Patel.
With employers in the Whittam constituency and across the country about to be whacked with a barrage of higher taxes thanks to this government, how does this government expect employment levels to stay high and for small businesses to be at the heart of any employment strategy that this government claims to have?
It is under the former government that we had the highest ever taxes for 70 years. And we have job centres where only 1 in 6 employers ever goes to a job centre to recruit. That is why we will transform our job centres into a new jobs and careers service, so people get the help they need and employers can recruit the staff they desperately need too.
Marcus Campbell-Sabers.
I welcome the fraud bill proposed by the government. Can the Minister explain how this will claw back money from people who cheat the system, and also how it will protect privacy?
Can I welcome my honourable friend's support for the proposed fraud bill? Current levels of fraud in the welfare system are absolutely unacceptable, with almost £10 billion lost last year. Increased use of data such as this will be essential so that we can clamp down on capital fraud, abroad fraud, but we will do that without sharing any information at all with banks and financial institutions.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for her personal commitment to transparency and ask her to share with the House, further to the question from her shadow earlier, how many thousands of people will die as a result of Labour's choice to cut the winter fuel payment?
I am very happy to share the data that shows that there are 200,000 more pensioners living in poverty after 14 years of the government of members opposite, and to publish information on the increase in the number of claims, 152% increase in the claims for pension credit because of the big, bold campaign that members on this side of the House are now running.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents want to see a fair and robust welfare system, but they have no truck with fraud. Can she assure that my constituents that she's doing everything she can to crack down on fraud and to make sure that people that genuinely need help get it? Thank you.
My honourable friend is correct to raise the issue. As I said earlier, we will not tolerate the current levels of fraud in our welfare system. He will be pleased to have noted the announcement made by the Prime Minister recently of a forthcoming fraud, error and debt bill. That will begin the work necessary to drive down fraud in the department.
Final question, Dave Dougal.
Mr. Speaker, can I share with the Secretary of State the plight of my constituent who went without child maintenance payments for 6 months, not because she'd done anything wrong or the paying parent's employer did anything wrong, who processed the direct deduction of earnings order, or that the paying parent wasn't actually paying, but the CMS misplaced the payments. Can she apologise for that mishap? And what plans has she got to rectify this deeply flawed organisation?
I'm very sorry to hear of the case to which the honourable member refers. It is not a case that I am familiar with, but if he would like to contact me with those details, I will look into it for him.
That completes questions. I'll let the front benches clear. Excuse me, please.
All right.
Before